the Book of Invasions. It would be like a Jew arriving somewhere and he had the Book of Abraham, or he had something like that with him. That man he understood, he had a consciousness of who he was. Now here you have Red Hugh O'Donnell, he was like a samurai. You know, they were warrior people, and he was the O'Donnell, which meant that he was at top of the warrior chain, and that's what he was. He was a total warrior, and he was not quite a contemporary of Shane O'Neill. He was a contemporary of Shane O'Neill's sons, and I'll tell you a little about him in a moment. So he was the next generation below Shane O'Neill. But so here was a man who carried a book with him. He carried certain things with him. Now, why did he do that? And why would he have that book with him when he walked into the Spanish throne room? Because the Milesians, the sons of Mil, had come from Spain. And the Goidels, the Goidels had come from Spain, not as Celts, as later synthesizers of European history will try and make you believe, that somehow they were a Celtic race from northern Spain, way earlier than the Celts. So here was a man who, when he was leaving in dire circumstances, managed to get hold of a copy of the Book of Invasions. Now, he may not have had it with him when he came down from Ballymote and from northern Sligo, and which is where they left from. They mustered at Ballymote in Sligo, in the territory of the O'Connors that had become their vassals. And I know this territory very well, because I'm from close there. Ballymote is a very close from where I come from. Now, they would have, and that of course was not only a castle, but it was also a monastery beside it, so that the old monastery was right there. So he may very well have picked that up somewhere in West Cork. It almost doesn't matter. But what he was reminding the Spanish king of was, we are your people. We're the same people as you are. 1,000 years, 2,000 years, that's nothing in what we're talking about here. We are the same people. Now that to me is extraordinary. That is truly extraordinary to me, and tells you so much about how these last chieftains understood and saw themselves, and what they saw the English as, quite frankly, the barbarians. They saw them as the northern Europeans who came in on horseback and who just raped and pillaged, and they didn't have any learning, and they didn't have any history except, their exploits. But the Irish had a different vision of themselves entirely. So, and we do, by the way, have quite a bit to corroborate my story on that. It's only when you go looking for it, you have to go looking for it, and then when you do, it's amazing how much of it you actually find in the remnants of the O'Donnells and the O'Neills in Spain, and the awareness of the ancientness of the connection. Now, that of course, we talked, Kevin, about how that was controversial because of the church's attitude to the Irish chieftainships, because they knew, and again, it's a backhanded compliment, that the Irish, they understood Rome and the church in Spain, the churchmen in Spain, not necessarily the king. The king would understand it better. In a way, paid a compliment to the antiquity of the Irish chieftains, in that they were pre-Christian, and they weren't quite acceptable as having gotten their power from the divine right of kings. It hadn't come through Charlemagne. It hadn't come from the actual apostolic line, if you like, which is interesting. But even though that resistance was, I'm sure, apparent to Red Hugh and the O'Donnells in Spain, whereas some of the churchmen might be a little less accepting of it. But it is so interesting that the Irish churchmen wouldn't have had a problem with it, which means that they never really quite let go of their ancient Druidic origins that had converted to Christianity. So they had no problem with the Laura Garbala, the Book of Invasions, and the fact that the ancient kings of Tara were in fact Gaels, Gaelic. Now, that gives me the little segue back to the kings of Tara, because, as we all know, the king of Tara for many, many centuries was the High King of Ireland. It's always been associated with being the High King of Ireland. And what Niall of the Nine Hostages had done in the 5th century was he actually had conquered Ulster. Ulster was not under the domain of the King of Tara. We don't quite understand why. It may be that Ulster, was remnants of the pre-Gaelic civilizations. We're not quite sure, or at least I'm not, and maybe some scholars are, but I haven't heard anybody explain why it was not until...
Would that be the Aaron?
Huh?
Would that be the Aaron?
No, they're all Gaelic. Ire and because Ire was one of the sons of Meal. So, if you remember the thing I wrote quite a few years ago, the true ancestors of Ireland, the sons of Meal. So Ir was one of the sons of Meal. So prior to the Miletians, so there may have been a stronger remains of pre-Miletian in northern Ireland. Now we know that they came as conquerors, so therefore Tara predated the sons of Meal. The Miletians came in, and we also know that they knew about Ireland and that they knew quite a bit about them, so that the people who'd gone there prior to that, like the Partholonians, all seem to have come from the same part. They had come from the Middle East, and particularly from, it seems like, the Black Sea, so up into that area, your world, the Persian area. But without going back into that's a different class, but I mention that because the O'Donnells, in less than only 400 years ago, had a great consciousness of that, and were very anxious to make that argument and to impress upon the King of Spain, which is why they should come and help them. We are a very old, legitimate people, connected to you and back through the rest of what they would see as the civilized world, the classical civilized world, back to not so much Rome, but certainly Greece. I think that's an incredibly powerful thought to have in one's head. Now, going all the way back 1,000 years to Niall of the Nine Hostages, and we know that the O'Donnells and the O'Neills are connected to Niall of the Nine Hostages. So how? Without going in through all of the machinations down to the... And they were very, very aware of it. They knew it exactly. So if you remember when I talked about Niall of the Nine Hostages, we talked about what in history, or at least English versions of history, is known as the three colas. And it's like a very controversial thing. It's kind of like the little princesses in England, what happened to them. It's one of these silly little things that has never really been properly resolved and is full of mythology. But There's some very good stuff about that in this wonderful book that Margaret bought me for my birthday this year, the O'Reilly's History of Ireland. Well, early Irish history and mythology in a good sense. It doesn't mean that it's patently wrong. It means that it's a very legitimate part of what we know about ourselves. But to make a long story short, the argument made by O'Reilly, which I totally accept because it fits in with everything else that I know, is that the three Colas were the three sons of Niall who conquered Ulster. So if you understand that Ulster never really had been part of it had never been united under the King of Tara.